Okay, so we are on Parshas Lech Lecha, page 55 in the Art Scroll Stone Chumash. That's Bereshit chapter 12. And the Parsha begins, Hashem said to Avram, go for yourself from your land, from your relatives, and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who curses you I will curse. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. So the commentaries comment that last week's Parsha ended. If you go, just turn back one page to page 53. Last week's Parsha ended, verse 31. Terach took Avram and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, the wife of Avram, his son, and they departed with them from Ur Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan. They arrived at Haran and settled there. So they were already going to the land of Canaan from Ur Kasdim. And now it says, Hashem said to Avram, go from yourself, from your land, from your relatives, and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. So, like, what's going on? They had left already from what seems to be their land, from Ur Kasdim, and to go to the land of Canaan. Now Hashem's telling him, go to the land of Canaan. So the Ramban explains that Avram's land was not Ur Kasdim. And in fact, Avraham, as it's clear from many places, that Avraham and Terach, their family, actually went back to Haran. That where the place that they said they arrived at Haran, they settled there. They settled there because that's where their family was from. And they were actually leaving Ur Kasdim to go to the land of Canaan, and that was on their own. They were leaving Ur Kasdim, and they stopped off in Haran, and they ended up settling there and not continuing to the land of Canaan. And Haran is identical to Aram Naharaim, or Padan Aram, which we find a few times later in the Torah. That's where Lavan lived, who was a that's where Lavan lived, who was a um, son of Besuel was a son of Nachor, so a grandson of Nachor, so he would have been a cousin of Avraham. And okay, so where are we here? I'm sorry, I'm not a cousin of Avram. He would have been a great nephew of Avram, but a cousin of Yitzchak, who married Lavan's sister Rivka. And there it talks about Eliezer. He went to Padan Aram, and we find it called Aram Naharaim, and that's Haran. That's this city that was really where they were from. They had gone from Haran earlier to Ur Kasdim, and Ur Kasdim is literally means the fires of the Chaldeans, the fires of the Kasdim, like the furnace of the Kasdim. And our sages say that that's where Avraham was thrown into a fiery furnace by Nimrod, who was the king of Shinar, which was the king of that area. And our sages say that Avram came to realization that there was nothing to this idolatry, and that there was actually a singular power that controlled everything. That they say that he saw the sun went down, and then the moon came out. So he saw, oh, the moon must have overpowered the sun. And then the sun came out in the morning again. And which one's stronger? Which one's more? How could it be? People worship the sun, people worship the moon. But he said there must be something that controls both, because there has to be one thing in charge. And so he came to the realization that there was nothing to this idolatry. So he destroyed all of his father's idols. And when came back to the king of the area, they said, we can't be having this. Someone's blaspheming our religion, and he had him thrown into fiery furnace. And Hashem saved Avraham, and because of that, because of the oppression that Avram faced by his being an Ivri, by him being in a sense a radical, standing against everyone in that place of the Kasdim, so they left and they went to their ancestral home, which was Padan Aram or Haran. But from there, Hashem told him to go to the land of Canaan. And what did he tell him to go? He told him, again in verse 2, and I will make of you a great nation, bless you, and him who curses you I will curse, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. Meaning, as here, where he was at the time, he was a radical. Like I said, he was oppressed in Ur Kasdim, and even in his ancestral home, he was viewed as this guy, this crazy guy, who's who's against everything we stand for. And he told him, go to the land of Canaan. There, I'll make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. And our sages say that when a person is traveling, our sages say that there are three things that they lose kind of in their travels. First of all, they're not able to procreate as much while they're traveling, that there's less opportunity and less it's very difficult to travel with children. I can tell you from experience, it's very difficult to travel with children. And then he said, I will bless you. And he says that bless you refers to monetary, material blessing. And when a person is traveling, usually they're not making money, they're spending money. And I will make your name great. That you'll be seems to be famous, that you'll be have a good reputation. And when a person's traveling, usually they don't have any reputation because they're going from a place where everyone knows them, where the reputation is built already, to a place where people don't know them. You lose your reputation that way. And that's what Hashem's telling us, that all three of these you'll have. And I saw in one of the handouts they have here that they quote Rav Pam, who was asking on that third one, I'll make your name great. Like, sounds like you're going to be famous, you're going to be a celebrity. Like, what use does Avram have for that? Like, he's looking to be like this, have a great name, he's going to be a big celebrity. So the Rav Pam answered that, like we were saying, that Avram's mission in life was to spread, as we'll see, is to spread the word, to teach people about Hashem. He had this discovery that there's one power in charge of the world, and he wanted to spread that and teach people about that. And where he was at the time, he was a radical. He had a really bad reputation. People saw him as this guy who's against us, who's alone and against everyone else. And so therefore, when he went to the land of Canaan, Hashem was telling him, I'll make your name great. There you will have a good reputation. People will respect you, and you'll be able to, and what your teachings will spread by virtue of that you'll be a great man who's teaching. And that's something the Ramban says is the theme really in the whole book of Bereshis, and especially in the stories of Avraham, is that we see how respected he really was. That you see he's treated as a prince among the people. And that gave him this opportunity to make a Kiddush Hashem and to sanctify the name of Hashem. Okay, so it continues in verse 4. So Avram went as Hashem had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Avram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Avram took his wives Sarai and Lot, his brother's son, and all their wealth that they had amassed, and the souls that they made in Haran. And they left to go to the land of Canaan, and they came to the land of Canaan. So what are these souls that they made in Haran? So our sages say that these are the followers that Avram, even though, like we said, he wasn't so respected there, but he did amass some following. And those followers, the ones that he taught about Hashem, so it calls them the souls that they had made. And I say from here, you learn that if someone teaches Torah, it's as if you created the person, because you really create a new spirit within them, and you change a person through the teaching of Torah. And they left to go to the land of Canaan. They came to the land of Canaan. On page 57, Avram passed into the land as far as Shechem until the plain of Moreh. The Canaanite was then in the land. And our sages say, the Ramban explains, that what does it mean the Canaanite were then in the land? That this land was really, that the land of Canaan, it's called the land of Canaan. The Canaanites were descendants of Ham, who was one of the sons of Noach. Noach had three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And the Canaanite, Canaan, the person Canaan, was the son of Ham. But Eretz Yisrael, the land of Canaan, fell in the territory of the descendants of Shem. That's they have the word anti-Semite. And Semitic, they call the language family of Hebrew and Aramaic and Arabic, they call them Semitic languages. And that comes from Shem, that it comes from descendants of Shem, who was a different son of Noah. And you find the Semitic languages that are really spoken all around Israel. Israel, they speak Hebrew, and in Syria, they spoke Ashuris, which is, and perhaps Aramaic, which was an Akkadian, was spoken in the Iraq, and Arabic is from the Arabia, and those are all Semitic languages. And so the land of Israel was in the territory of the people of Shem, but it's telling us that the Canaanites were then in the land, that that the descendants of Ham had conquered the land of Canaan, and now it was the beginning of Shem, the descendant Abraham, who was the great descendant of Shem, taking it back. Okay, and in verse 7, Hashem appeared to Avram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. So he built an altar there to Hashem who appeared to him. From there he relocated to the mountain east of Beis El, pitched his tent with Beis El in the west and Ai in the east, and he built there an altar to Hashem and invoked Hashem by name. Then Avram journeyed on, journeying steadily towards the south. You see that he's traveling around. He's moving from place to place in the land of Canaan, and you find this later in the Parsha also. On page 61, if you look on page 61, it says that Lot chose for himself the plain of the Jordan. And in verse 12 on page 61, it says, Avram dwelled in the land of Canaan. It doesn't give his place, just he dwelled in the land of Canaan, meaning he didn't dwell in a specific place. He moved from place to place. And in verse 14, it says, Hashem said to Avram after Lot had parted from him, raise now your eyes, look out from where you are, northward, southward, eastward, westward, I'll give it all to you. And in verse 17, arise, walk about the land through its length and breadth, for to you I will give it. He told Avram to walk the length and breadth of the land, that he was to travel the entire land. And our sages say that where there's different ways that a person acquires something. That means that to transfer ownership of something, to take ownership of something that doesn't belong to you, to make it yours, there's a number of ways it's done. So with movable objects, it's done either through picking it up or through making it move, moving it towards you. So let's say if a person buys a chair, so they take ownership of the chair by picking up the chair and with the intention to take ownership, then it's theirs. With an animal, a person would usually take ownership. Let's say they buy a cow. They take ownership by moving it 4 amos. So they take the reins or whatever and move it 4 amos. Now it's theirs. That's how they take ownership. With land could be acquired in a number of ways. Land, as opposed to movable objects, could be acquired with money. That means that when you pay the previous owner, that payment itself affects causes the transaction to occur and causes the transfer of ownership. It could be acquired with a contract, with a document. That means that if the seller writes out that I am hereby transferring ownership of this property to that other person, when he gives over that signed document, that causes the transfer of ownership. And it could be acquired through what's called chazaka, which means by acting as an owner, by doing actions of an owner. And in this case, where he's not buying the land from anybody, there's nobody who he's paying money or giving or getting a contract from. So the transfer of ownership is effected through acting as the owner. And one of the ways that's done is just moving through it as an owner. What's that?
Farmers would come to the land.
Yeah.
And if they were there for X amount of time,
yeah,
they became squatters and they declared that they were the owners of the land.
So by Talmudic law, that is actually not the case. So by Talmudic law, there's such a concept of cheskas gimel shanim, which is by acting as an owner for 3 years. But the Talmud says very clearly, the Gemara says very clearly that that works as a proof to ownership. It doesn't work as to take ownership, meaning that if a person says, what are you doing on my land? This is mine. And you say, what do you mean? You sold it to me 10 years ago. And he says, bring proof. You say, I lost the deed, but I've been working it for years and you never said anything. That's proof. That could function as proof that there are witnesses testifying that he's been acting as owner for such and such an amount of time. That's proof that it works. But if he says, oh, yeah, I just came here and you never said anything and I was here for 3 years, so that's called in the Talmud's language, it's chazaka she'eni matayna, meaning it's a acting as ownership without any claim. And if he doesn't have a claim, then there's no like squatter's rights in that sense. So in certain in regard to certain things, there are squatters' rights. So, like, let's say if the public uses a shortcut through someone's yard, let's say, and the person allows it, so for a certain amount of time, that might actually give rights. But just to claim ownership because you were there and nobody said anything, or you were there for an amount of time, that doesn't work. It works as proof, not as a claim. But to actually act as an owner could acquire it with permission from the owner. With the owner says, "Here, it's yours. You take ownership," and he does certain things demonstrating ownership. So that also works. It's called kinyan chazak. There might be other ways also that are like technically that are complicated. So I'll leave those out, like kinyan sadr and things like that. Okay. Um, So anyway, so his traveling through the land was an act of ownership of the land, and that he was acquiring it for his descendant on behalf of his descendants. The Ramban though says that additionally, the whole story of our patriarchs and matriarchs, the Torah goes to great length describing really to very fine detail things that happened to them. And the Ramban says it's because whatever happened to our patriarchs and matriarchs was a precedent for what would happen to their descendants. And that was another part of him traveling through the land by Avram going there, he was setting a precedent for his descendants to be there and for what would happen to them there. And for example, it says the first place what happened to him. So somehow ended up way back. But going back to page 57, where we were, it says that they passed into the land as far as the site of Shechem. The first place it mentions is Shechem. That's the Ramban comments. That's the first place that the Jewish people conquered in the land of Israel. When did they conquer Shechem? That's when Shimon and Levi, when Dinah was kidnapped by the son of the chief of Shechem. So Shimon and Levi came through the city killing everybody and rescued their sister Dinah. So that's the first place that we conquered in the land of Canaan was Shechem. That's the first place that Avram went. And then until the plain of Moreh, which I think Rashi says is outside Shechem, which is where the mountains of Mount Gerizim and Mount Avel, which is where the first place that the Jewish people went when they came into the land of Canaan with Yeshua, with Joshua. And then it says that from there he relocated in verse 8 from the mountain east of Beis El, pitched his tent with Beis El on the west and Ai on the east. Ai was the second place that Yeshua conquered when he came into the land. So he's setting a precedent for what his descendants will do when they come into the land. Okay. So now moving on page 57 in verse 10, there was a famine in the land, and Avram descended to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. And it occurred as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife, Sarah, see now I have known that you are a woman of beautiful appearance, and it shall occur when the Egyptians will see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say you are my sister, that it may go well with me for your sake, that I may live on account of you. He said, you're a beautiful woman. I'm an individual traveling with you. They'll kill me to get to you. So he said, say that you're my sister, so they'll let me live. And in verse 14, but it occurred with Avram's coming to Egypt, the Egyptians saw the woman was very beautiful. So when the officials of Paro saw her, they lauded her for Paro. And the woman was taken to Paro's house. He treated Avram well for her sake, and he acquired sheep, cattle, donkeys, slaves, maidservants, female donkeys, camels. So what happened on page 59? But Hashem afflicted Paro along with his household with severe plagues because of the matter of Sarai, the wife of Avram. Paro summoned Avram, and he said, what is this that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she is your wife? Medrash says that she told Paro after he was afflicted with these afflictions, with these plagues. Why did you say she's my sister, that I would take her as my wife? Now here's your wife, take her and go. He said, I can't protect you. You have to go, but I'm not going to keep her. So Paro gave men orders concerning him. They escorted him and his wife and all that was his out of Egypt. So here again, the Ramban says this was a precedent for the descendants of Avram, the Jewish people, that just like Avram went down to Egypt because of a famine, he was molested there by the Egyptians, by Paro taking his wife, and then the Egyptians were struck with the plagues, and they were forced to send us away. That's what happened later to his descendants, that the descendants of Avram, the Jewish people, descended to Egypt originally because of a famine, and they molested us there, they oppressed us there, and they were struck with plagues, and then they were forced to send us out. Okay, and the Malbim comments here also. What was Avram's plan? He says, "Say that you're my sister, because if not, they're going to kill me." So what was he expecting to happen? Of course, if they were going to kill him to get to her, of course they were going to take her. So the Malbim explains that his plan was if she was married, then she's off limits. And the only way to get to her is make her on limits by killing her husband. But if he was her brother, a brother in those days was I mean, even today, to this day, is like the brother is kind of like the guardian of his sisters. You find by Shimon and Levi. It was their sister that was taken. They were the ones who freed her. And a brother was kind of like the protector, but he was the one you had to go through to get her. And the tradition was you offer a price and you offer the dowry. And if he accepts, then, he's the one who gives her hand in marriage. So what he did is just set a very high price. So it wasn't really a matter of her being off limits. It's just you have to work, you got to afford it. And he set a price that he didn't think anyone would meet. But he didn't expect that Paro himself would take interest, and once it's the king taking interest, then all bets are up. Okay, so what happens next? So it says that he was sent with great wealth, which is also a precedent for the Jewish people later. So on page 59, chapter 13, so Avram went up from Egypt with his wife, all that was with him, and with him to the south. Now Avram was very laden with livestock, silver, and gold. Again, he was Paro treated him very well on account of Sarai. He proceeded on his journeys from the south to Beis El, to the place again he traveled around. And verse 5, I'm sorry, also Lot, who went with Avram, Lot was Avram's nephew, had flocks, cattle, and tents, and the land could not support them dwelling together, for their possessions were abundant, and they were unable to dwell together. And there was quarreling between the herdsmen of Avram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock, and the Canaanite and Perizzite were then dwelling in the land. The Medrash says, Rashi quotes the Medrash, that the quarreling was on account of the herdsmen of Lot were saying, "Oh, God gave this land to Avram, so it's all ours. So we could graze wherever we want." Whereas the herdsmen of Avram understood that it was given really to Avram for his descendants to take possession, but he didn't take possession yet. So he would only graze in the places that were not owned by others. And that caused the quarreling. And that's why it concludes the Canaanite and Perizzite were then dwelling in the land, meaning that they were the owners at the time. So Avram said to Lot, "Please let there be no strife between me and you, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not the land before you? Please separate from me. If you go left, then I will go right. If you go right, then I will go left." So this implies you go one direction, I'm going to go all the way to the other. You go left, I'm going to go right. We'll go part ways and stay far, far away from each other. But Rashi actually comments that's not what it means. Rashi says, if you go left, I'll be on your right. And if you go right, I'll be on your left, meaning I'll be there, I'll be near in case you ever need me. And he continues that it ends up, as we'll see, that he did have need of him, and Avram did come to his rescue. So on page 61, so Lot raised his eyes and saw the entire plain of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before Hashem, destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of Hashem, like the land of Egypt going to its sower. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed from the east, thus parted from one another. And as we said, Avram lived in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain and pitched tents as far as Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and sinful towards Hashem exceedingly. So Lot, through his lot, no pun intended, or maybe, with these very wicked people that he joined with the very wicked people. And in verse 14, Hashem said to Avram, after Lot had parted from him, "Raise now your eyes and look out from where you are, northward and southward, eastward, westward. The land you'll see, I'll give it to you and your descendants forever," etc. But our sages comment that it says Hashem said to Avram after Lot had parted from him, as if the two are related. And our sages say that it is related, that the entire time that Lot was with Avram, he didn't really merit this communication from Hashem. And our sages say this tells us that being together with the wicked could drive the Shekhinah, drive the divine presence away. And now that him and Lot had separated, now Hashem spoke to him. Okay, and in verse 18, as we said, and Avram moved his tent and came and dwelled in the plains of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and he built there an altar to Hashem. Now, chapter 14, the war of the 4 kings and the 5 kings. And it happened in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. So that these made war on Bera, on page 63, king of Sodom, Birsha, king of Amorah, Shinav, king of Admah, Shemever, king of Tzevaim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. So the Medrash says, Rashi quotes, that Amraphel, king of Shinar, I'm not sure if this is Rashi, I think I saw this in the Ramban actually, that Amraphel, king of Shinar, so Rashi says Amraphel was the same person as Nimrod, but that these represent, that this is again setting a precedent for the Medrash says, for the 4 kingdoms that will dominate the Jewish people, that will be exiled amongst them, and how Avram does battle against them here and defeats them, that ultimately we will defeat and will outlast. And that's Amraphel, king of Shinar, that is Nimrod, who was the king of Shinar, which is Babylon. Ariach, king of Elasar, he says, represents I think he said it was Persia and Media. Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, which represents Greece, and Tidal, king of Goyim, which represents Rome and Western civilization. Goyim means nations, like the Roman Empire that was composed of many nations. That these made war on Bera, again, they made war on these kingdoms. So the 4 kingdoms made war on the 5 kingdoms. In verse 3, all these that joined in the valley of Siddim, and in verse 4, 12 years they served Kedorlaomer, and they rebelled for 13 years. In the 14th year, Kedorlaomer and the kings fought against them, and they destroyed them. And where am I? So they had this battle, the 4 kings against the 5 kings. And in verse 10 on page 63, the valley of Siddim was full of vitamin wells, was like lime. It's like a mineral wells. The king of Sodom and Amorah fled and fell into them, while the rest fled to a mountain. They seized all the wealth. So the 4 kings seized all the wealth of Sodom and Amorah and all the food, and they departed. And they captured Lot and his possessions, Avram's nephew, and they left, for he was residing in Sodom. So they captured Lot and took him away as a captive. So in verse 13, then came the fugitive and told Avram the Ivri, who dwelt in the plains of Mamre, the Amorite. So Ivri, it calls Avram the Ivri, meaning he was from the other side of the river. The brother of Eshcol and who dwelt in the plains of Mamre, the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol and the brother of Aner, these being Avram's allies. So Mamre, Eshcol, and Aner, who were Amorites, the natives of the land, but they were allies of Avram. And when Avram heard that his kinsman Lot was taken captive, he armed his disciples who had been born in his house, 318 on page 65, and he pursued them as far as Dan. And he with his servants deployed against them at night and struck them. He pursued them as far as Chova, which is to the north of Damascus. He brought back all the possessions. He brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions, as well as the women and the people. So Avram defeated these 4 kings who had defeated 5 kings earlier. So Avram, with a small group, defeated them and brought back Lot and the kings as well. So in verse 17, the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from defeating Kedorlaomer, and the kings that were with him to the valley of Shaveh. And in verse 18, but Malki-Tzedek, king of Shalem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of Hashem the Most High. He blessed him, saying, blessed is Avram of God the Most High, maker of heaven and earth, and blessed is God the Most High, who has delivered your foe into your hand. And he gave him a tenth of everything, that Avram gave Malki-Tzedek a tenth of everything. And our sages say that this individual, Malki-Tzedek, was in fact Shem, the son of Noah, who was Avram's great, 9 generations back grandfather. And he was serving Hashem, and Avram gave him Meiser. So he gave him a tenth of everything he had. And in verse 21, the king of Sodom said to Avram, give me the people and take the possessions for yourself. I say to say, he saw that Avram was generous, and he said, please, at least don't keep my people as spoils of war, as slaves. Set them free. You could keep the possessions, but at least set the people free. In verse 22, Avram said to the king of Sodom, I lift up my hand to Hashem, God of the Most High, maker of heaven and earth, if so much as a thread to a shoe strap, or if I take from anything of yours, so you shall not say, it is I who made Avram rich. Far from me, only what the young men have eaten, and the share of the men who accompanied me, and Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, those were his allies that he lived amongst, they will take their portion. So Avram refused to keep any of the spoils of this war. And so why was that? Why didn't he keep it? So he said, so you shall not say it is I who made Avram rich. I saw the commentators say a number of reasons why he didn't want to keep it. One is that he wanted the mitzvah. He wasn't doing this as a way to make money. As he wasn't like a what's the word? Like a mercenary who was out there fighting wars for glory and possessions. He was fighting it to rescue his nephew. That was his intention. And if he kept the spoils of war, it would really change the whole dynamic of what he did. That I just could tell you when I was a yeshiva bacher. So I used to our yeshiva. I was in yeshiva in Scranton. Our yeshiva was about half an hour or so from the airport, half an hour drive, and I would need to go to the airport when I would fly home. And I would get rides from people, and so I was very willing because I needed rides at times to also offer rides to people. Even a lot of times people would leave very early in the morning. So let's say there was a 6 o'clock flight, we'd have to leave at like 4:30 in the morning. And to return the favor, I would take people to the airport. And when they would offer to pay, I would always turn them down because I wasn't I was trying to make that point that I'm not a taxi driver. I'm not doing this as a taxi. I know now with Uber, like everyone's a taxi driver, but Uber, Lyft, whatever. But yeah, that when you take money for something, it's already changing the dynamic. And he wanted to do this as a mitzvah, not as a mercenary. But I saw elsewhere in the commentaries that they said that he wanted to ensure to attribute the victory to the right person or to the right victor. And traditionally the spoils of war belong to the victor. The victor go the spoils. I think that's the expression. And if Avram would take from the spoils, he's implying that it was his victory. He won. But in reality, it was Hashem's victory. So that's why he donated. He wouldn't accept any of the spoils to make a statement. This wasn't my victory, and it was just the people who were with him. He allowed them to take. Okay, so are we? Okay, so now on page 67. After these events, the word of Hashem came to Avram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, Avram. I'm a shield for you. Your reward is very great." That the commentaries say he was worried that after this great victory, he was worried that he used up his merits. This was a miraculous victory. He thought maybe that's my reward for everything I've done in this world. Now I'm starting from scratch. And Hashem said, "Don't worry. I'm a shield for you. Your reward is very great." And Avram said, "My Lord Hashem Elokim, what can you give me, seeing that I go childless, and the steward of my house is the Masin Eliezer?" Meaning that I don't have any children. Who's going to inherit me when I pass? If there's traditionally, if there was he doesn't have any sons or daughters. So it would be the highest servant, like the highest servant of the house who would take possession of everything he had. He said that's the native of Damascus. In verse 3, then Avram said, "See, to me you have given no offspring, and see, my steward inherits me." Suddenly the word of Hashem came to him, saying, "That one will not inherit you. Only him that shall come forth from within you shall inherit you. You'll have natural born son who will inherit you." And he took him outside and said, "Gaze now towards heaven and count the stars, if you're able to count them." And he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." And he trusted in Hashem, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. So it says here he took him outside. What does that mean? He took him outside. So on the surface level, it means to show him the stars to make the statement, your offspring will outnumber the stars. So he took him outside so he could see the stars. But the Medrash says it means he took him outside. He was taking him outside the stars, meaning that Avram was saying that I could see my fate. The stars hold for me is that I won't have children. And Hashem took him outside the stars, meaning he was making a statement that the stars don't govern you. Fate doesn't govern you. And you're above all of that. And you could act outside of fate. And he trusted in Hashem. He reckoned it to his righteousness. And he said to him, I am Hashem who brought you out of Ur Kasdim to give you this land to inherit it. And this is really fascinating. If you look through the commentaries, especially Tosfos and the Ramban and Seder Olam and elsewhere as well, they're not all here, but these two prophecies were not at the same time. We have this prophecy up until here, after the word of Hashem came to Avram saying, fear not, I'm a shield for you, your word is very great. And then this prophecy, he said in verse 7, he said to him, I am Hashem your God, I brought you out of Ur Kasdim. These were years apart. And I see the note in ArtScroll in 721 says, according to Seder Elam, this covenant was made when Avram was 70 years old. Thus, it preceded the prophetic version of the above verse, which occurred when Avram was 75 years old. And that's not how I understood Tosfos and Brachos and the Ramban. How I understood it, actually, this one came years after the previous one. But it's a little complicated how exactly the order of events goes. So I'm not confident in how I understood it. But whatever it was, these two were separated by years. So anyway, so in verse 8, he said, my Lord Hashem Elokim, whereby shall I know that I am to inherit it? And he said to him, take to me 3 heifers, 3 goats, 3 rams, a turtle dove, and a young dove. And he took these to him, he cut them up in the center, placed each piece opposite its counterpart. The birds, however, did not cut up. And the commentaries say that this when he said, whereby shall I know that I am to inherit it? He was saying, will I know that my descendants won't sin and lose their merit to inherit it? And the answer was, take me 3 heifers, 3 goats, 3 rams, a turtle dove, and a young dove. These are the animals that are brought as offerings. And it was telling him that if they sin, they'll be able to atone for their sins by bringing offerings. Okay, it says, birds of prey descended upon the carcasses, and Avraham drove them away. Yeah, so our sages say that these birds of prey are representing the nations which are trying to end this covenant by destroying the nation of Israel, but Avram's merit or the descendants of Avram will drive them away, things of that nature. So it happened as the sun was about to set, a deep sleep fell upon Avram, and behold, a great darkness fell upon him. And he said to Avram, know with certainty that your offspring shall be an alien in a land not their own. They will serve them, and they will oppress them 400 years. But also the nation that they will serve I shall judge, and afterwards they will leave with great wealth. And the commentaries say that the Medrash says that we were aliens in a land that was not ours for 400 years, his sons really, because Yitzchak was born 400 years before we left Egypt. So from the birth of Yitzchak, he was born in the land of Canaan, but we didn't have ownership of the land of Canaan then. It was the land of Canaan. The Canaanites were the ones in charge. And from the point of the birth of Yitzchak until we left Egypt, we were truly aliens in a land not ours for that entire time.
Palestinian.
Well, okay. The Pelishtim were there. Okay, you had to. Yeah, the Pelishtim were there. So, yeah, so actually, Yitzchak had encounters with the Philistines, with Avimelech. Okay. What time? Okay. So, where am I? Where's the Hebrew? Okay, so moving on, and as it happened, so it happened, the sun set, it was very dark. Behold, there was a smoky furnace and a torch of fire which passed between these pieces. On that day, and that was the covenant being sealed, on that day Hashem made a covenant with Abraham, saying to your descendants, I've given the land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River, the Canaanite, Kenizzite, Kadmonite, the Hittite, Perizzite, Rephaim, the Amorite, the Canaanite, Girgashite, and the Yebusite, the land of these nations are given to your descendants. Okay. And our sages say that there are, if you count up the nations here, you have the Canaanite, Kenizzite, Kadmonite, Hittite, Perizzite, Rephaim, Amorite, Canaanite, Girgashite, and Yebusite. Those are 10 nations. But we didn't actually take possession of all 10. We only took possession of 10 of 7 of those. And the Canaanite, Kenizzite, Kadmonite, which are the land of Edom, Moab, and Ammon, so those we never actually took control of, and I say that that will come to us in the time of Mashiach, in the Messianic times. Okay, so now we have the story of Hagar and Yishmael. So Hagar was, so in verse 1, chapter 16 on page 71, now Sarai, Avram's wife, had borne him no children. She had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar, and Sarai said to Avram, see now Hashem has restrained me from bearing. Consort now with my maidservant, perhaps I will be built up to her. So Avram heeded the voice of Sarai. So Sarai, Avram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian, her maidservant, after 10 years of Avram dwelling in the land of Canaan, and gave her to Avram, her husband, to him as a wife. So Avram married his former maidservant Hagar, or Sarai's maidservant Hagar, and he consorted with Hagar, and she conceived, and when he saw that she had conceived, her mistress was lowered in her esteem. So now she was Sarai's former maidservant. Now she's the wife, and she's giving birth to an heir to Avram, which Sarai wasn't able to do. So she was starting to look down on Sarai. And so Sarai said to Avram, the outrage against me is due to you. It is I who gave my maidservant into your bosom. And when she saw she had conceived, I became lowered in her esteem. And now she's starting to mistreat me and look down on me. So let Hashem judge between me and you. And Avram said to Sarai, behold, your maidservant is your hand to do as you see fit. And Sarai dealt harshly with her, so she fled from her. So Hagar ended up fleeing. And in verse 7, an angel of Hashem found her by the spring of water in the desert, at the spring in the road. And he said, Hagar, the maidservant of Sarai, where have you come? And the angel said, return to your mistress and submit yourself to her domination, and I will increase your offspring, and they will not be counted for abundance. And the angel of Hashem said, behold, you will conceive, give birth to a son, and you shall name him Yishmael, for Hashem has heard your prayer, and he shall be a wild beast of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And over all his brothers he shall dwell, that he will dominate his brothers and those around him. And she called the name of Hashem who spoke to her, you are the God of vision. For she said, can I have seen even here after having been seen? Therefore the well was called the well of the living one, appearing to me, the Hebrews, that's Ber Lachai Roi, is between Kadesh and Bered, and Hagar in verse 15 on page 73, bore Avram a son. Avram called the name of the son, the Hagar bore him Yishmael. And Avram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Yishmael to Avram. Okay, so now 13 years later, when it's Yishmael's bar mitzvah, when Avram was 99 years old, so 13 years later, Hashem appeared to Avram and said, I am Akel Shakai, walk before me and be perfect. I will set my covenant between me and you. I will increase you most exceedingly. And Avram threw himself upon his face, and Hashem spoke with him, saying, and as for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be a father of a multitude of nations. Your name shall no longer be Avram, but your name shall be Avraham, Abraham, which is a contraction of, for I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. It's Av Hamon Goyim, a father of multitude of nations. Okay. So the Hamek Dover says this is actually referring to Yaakov, who would be born, Esav, in the 12 tribes, or maybe even the descendants of Keturah, according to the Radak. So there are different opinions what these multitude of nations is referring to. Okay, but if you think about it, the powers nowadays from Avraham is Ishmael, the Arabs come from Avraham. The Western civilization, Esav, comes from Avraham, and the Jewish people come from Avraham. And who knows who the descendants of Keturah are? It says that they traveled to the east. Who knows who that is? Okay. And he says, well, ratify, keep the covenant with you, and the land of Canaan will be your eternal heritage. And on page 75, Hashem said to Avram, and as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout the generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. And this is the mitzvah of bris milah, of circumcision, that every male in your household has to be circumcised. And in verse 15, and Hashem said to Avram, and as for Sarai, your wife, do not call her name Sarai, For Sarah is her name. I'll bless her. Indeed, I'll give you a son through her. I'll bless her, and she shall give rise to nations. Kings of peoples will rise from her. So not only was Avram's name changed, but Sarai's name was changed as well to be Sarah. So Sarai, Reb Hur says it was possessive. It means my princess, like Sarah. Sar is a prince. Sarah would be a princess. So Sarai means she's my princess, meaning that she's like Avram's wife is where her princess comes from. And now she's Sarah, meaning in general she's a princess, even independently. Okay. So Avram threw on verse 17, I'm sorry, page 75, and Avram threw himself upon his face and laughed, and he thought, shall a child be born to a 100-year-old man? He was 99, and shall Sarah, a 90-year-old woman, give birth? And Hashem said to Hashem, oh, that Yishmael might, and Avram said to Hashem, oh, that Yishmael might live before you. And Hashem said, nevertheless, in page 77, your wife Sarah will bear you a son. You shall call his name Yitzchak, and I will fulfill my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him, that my covenant with you will be fulfilled through Yitzchak. But regarding Yishmael, I have heard you, I have blessed him, will make him fruitful, will increase him most exceedingly. He will beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But I will maintain my covenant through Yitzchak, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year. So it's saying Yishmael will be great and powerful, but the covenant of the land of Canaan and to carry your mission as the representative of Hashem in the world will be through Yitzchak. And in verse 23, then Avram took his son Yishmael and all those servants born in the household and all those he purchased with money, all the servants, all the male members of Avram's house, and he circumcised the flesh of their surpluses. He circumcised them on that day. Avram was 99 years old, and his son Yishmael was 13 years old when he was circumcised. And this is the source of the Arab custom that Muslims will circumcise at 13, following their ancestor Yishmael. On that day was Avram circumcised with Yishmael his son, and all the people of his household, born in the household purchased for money from strangers, were circumcised with him. Shkoyach. Everyone have a great Shabbos.